Facebook is up and ready to go. Welcome, everyone. All right, looks like we are live on Facebook. Welcome, everyone. So, results, 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 and why they are not enough. This is what we're going to be talking about tonight. And as usual, um, I will be delivering based on my real life experience of things that I have gone through, things that I actually know, and I'm going to share this experience with you so that you are able to implement this in your daily life. So, if this is your first time joining me, my name is Tina. I am a happiness coach and I help people deal with those difficult emotions and being able to process those in a way that is effective and gets you more productivity. And I do this through sharing my experience of tools that actually work. My background is um, I personally have been through a lot of trauma in my life. I've been through a lot of therapy, a lot of stuff. If you do the ACEs test, adverse childhood experiences, I get a 10 out of 10. Not the test you want to have perfect on, but I have had that. That being said, these tools, these techniques that I use, I share so that you guys can apply them to your life. And these not only work for your personal life, but they will work in your professional life. And today's topic, we're going to be talking more about the professional side, but we're also going to be talking about why, when people say, "Oh, it's just business. It's not personal." Bullshit. It's not true whatsoever. And I'm going to provide you some experiences, some stories, and real live examples of some things that went through and where we did actually get results, but it still ended up in failure ultimately because um, we didn't address the emotional issues soon enough. Uh, so I'm just dealing with my hair here a little bit. Okay, so back in my transportation logistics days, way back, we were going through a project. And this was more a change management project where we had two vendors that we had landed contracts with. And we landed contracts with because we had promised to be able to give them all these various freight savings because we could co-load their product together because they ship to the same suppliers and sorry, not suppliers, customers. And so if we did the warehousing for them, we could be able to maximize the trailer capacity. One customer had really light product and high volume, and the other customer had a lot of dense product, low volume. And so this company that I actually went to, I had actually got hired at that company because they had to recruit out of emergency because stuff was going sideways. They had had these clients for about 2 years. Nothing was happening. They weren't able to provide the results and they were at risk of losing these vendors. So they hired in some hired guns. One was a Marine, a former Marine, and he came in. There was a bunch of military guys from the US that came up to help us and be able to solve the problem. And they came in guns a blazing, let me tell you. And I was hired in. I got there. I was only with the company like 2 weeks and I had this guy who was really scary come in and he's like slamming his fist down on my desk and he's standing there and he's yelling at me. And he thought I was one of the longtime people that had been there and he didn't know any different because, and part of that was because of the way that I carried myself. I had a lot of experience and in my previous company that I had been with for 10 years. So I was part of the group that got recruited by the headhunters, right? So we came in to try and solve the problem, but there were a whole lot more than just the technical problems that were going on. If it was just the job, it was easy. It was a cakewalk, but there were so many other challenges. Hey, Erjo Omega, I hope I said that correctly. Uh, so going through this stuff, Um, so there were a lot of heightened emotions, a lot of stress, a lot of anger, both on the vendor side, both of the customers. They were really pissed because we weren't getting results, nothing was happening. So when even bringing in the new people, it was like being dropped into a pot of boiling water, right? Because the temperatures were already really high and people were really upset. So having to come in, learning how to mitigate and reduce those emotions, build that trust with the people. And I was customer service load planning, so I managed orders and I managed to be able to plan what orders go together. And so it's a bit of a time sensitive job. You had to get the orders put together in a way that maximized the trailers and get them done in time on a daily basis to be able to get to the warehouse so that the warehouse can get those orders picked. So there are a lot of moving parts with it, right? And then you had two different vendors that customers that had different timelines, timeframes, requirements, and even though they were delivering to the same customers, um, and this was grocery retail, so it's like, these are big high volume things and low margins because it's food, right? So low margins, you don't make a whole lot of money in grocery retail, and you have to be very lean and strategic. And when you're working for a third party logistics company, you have to do the job better than your customer, because if not, they will just take their freight back in-house and they don't have to deal with you. So even your own customer is your competitor. So it's not just like other third-party logistics companies that you have to worry about. There are a lot of different threats that you have to deal with, and you have to manage and mitigate those challenges as you go through these things. so, um, so needless to say, top to top, between the customers, higher ups, VPs and senior management, CEOs and stuff like that, of what they were promised and what we were actually able to deliver, they actually brought in some change management experts, and I was part of that project team. And going through that was an amazing experience. It was really, really good. I thrived in that particular area because it was so rewarding. I love being able to work together in a group to be able to solve problems and to be able to put aside the emotional differences. So one of the skills that I brought to the team was being able to help people manage and regulate their emotions so that they can, instead of fighting against each other, getting their backs up and trying to be the ones that are proving that they are right about something, that I was able to help diffuse some of the situations when they got really tense, and I was able to help both parties be understood so that we could actually get to a solution and find common ground and work together instead of against each other. And so as I was in this group and I participated and I spoke up and I spoke my truth and I spoke the things that I see, where a lot of other people, and I found this a bit strange, but then again, I had been through a lot of recovery, so I had learned the value of speaking up, and I also know the cost of what happens when you actually don't speak your truth. And because of that, I was able to participate and open up in this group in a way that even the change management guy was actually so impressed. He used this as one of his big case studies, because we were able to not only break down the barriers of why we couldn't actually co-load, why we couldn't execute on the promises that um, we we had made to the customers, and then track it so that in a very short period of time, I want to say it was like 90 days that we had got this done, that we had moved from not being able to do this to making a bunch of internal changes within the company. And all the senior managers and CEOs had to do was just give their approvals. And we as a group had broken down the barriers. We figured out the challenges that were in the way that were blocking us. And their job, the higher ups, their job was just to provide us with the tools. Now, there were certain things that we could not change with the customer, and we had those as like non-negotiables, right? In the meantime, we had worked together, created a project plan, figured out what were the real actual problems. And this only came from open, honest communication. And we put in action plans and we tracked the progress and we did all of these things. We moved people around in different positions. In fact, I got promoted twice within a 1 year period because they realized not only could I do the things that I was originally hired for, I had better skill levels. And then when I got put in that role, they realized I had even more skill levels. So then they put me in another one. So, and this was stuff I had zero experience doing before, but they saw I had the aptitude. So the power of somebody actually believing in you and seeing your potential and investing in you, that for me lit me up. And I expanded and I really grew in that company. There were a lot of friggin' challenges, though, a lot of challenges, which aren't always a bad thing. So going through this stuff, basically, long story short, we not only broke down the barriers of what the challenges were for being able to um, actually execute and deliver both of the customer's product on the same trailer to the same delivery point. And it did save a lot of money. And we had worked with our systems, we had worked with the timing of orders, we had worked with which people needed it to be in the right areas. We moved people around, we met regularly, we focused on the projects. And then we also tracked the metrics to be able to understand, okay, not only did we do the co-loading, and we tracked how much savings. So within that 30 days, we were able to, 90 days, we were able to save over $400,000 in freight savings for both clients. And that was huge. That was huge. And then we tracked it to our milestone. I can't remember the exact number, so I'm not going to quote it here. This has been more than 20 years ago, so give me some grace on not remembering the numbers. So once we hit that threshold, there was a certain point when we hit our target, we hit our milestone of how much we could save the customers, and we proved that our system actually worked. And that opened up a possibility for us to have a gain share. So after this threshold, whatever savings, that additional savings that we were able to provide for the customers, we were actually able to lock into a profit share with that. And so because of that, we tracked this and we were able to hit our targets, show that we were able to get a substantial amount. Again, I cannot remember the exact numbers. I'm not going to quote them because I don't want to misquote the numbers. And then somebody tries to go do a fact check and go, Tina's lying. No, it's just been it's been actually over 30 years. So yeah, forgive my memory loss on the details. But I knew we hit our milestones. But here's the thing. So we got the results. We broke down all of the barriers. We exceeded expectations. We got the results. Here's the problem. We still ended up losing both clients. Why? Because of the emotional discord that ended up happening between top to top. So even though the teams performed all of their roles to elite excellence, the bad blood at the top, they just did not have any trust. They did not do any emotional work to rebuild that trust and the connection, and the partnerships fell apart. We lost. One of the vendors I know had over $30 million in freight that we managed in a year. The other one was just as big. So again, I wasn't as detailed on the other vendor, but it also limited our potential. That one other client that came on that was waiting to see how these two other vendors, before they fully dived in, we lost the ability to expand with that vendor as well. So ultimately, these three top Fortune 500 companies, we lost all three, not because of the team and not because they weren't able to produce results and execute to an elite level, but because of the emotional discord that happened top to top between the companies. And no trust was rebuilt, no emotional connection was rebuilt. So, no matter what results, what proof we provided to show that we actually got results, there were still hurt feelings between the companies. And ultimately, that ended up costing us. And so this is why I talk about how it's so important to be able to manage those emotions. And let's just say, I can't remember, there were all kinds of pricing structures and everything, but just one of the small pieces. So a $30 million freight account, and say you get a 4% management fee to manage that freight. That's a couple $1 million, right? Lost. And not only that, it's the lost opportunities that you can't track as well. There's no KPIs to track the potential customers that you ended up losing because people couldn't manage their friggin' emotions. They didn't know how to play nice with each other, and they had way too big of egos, and it ended up clashing. And companies that could have made huge differences, major impacts, it all fell apart, and all of our work was for naught. Although I have this nice little piece that I was able to put on my resume, and yes, I was able to be part of that team, ultimately because the emotions weren't managed. Um, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. What ended up happening is when those two main clients got lost, and we only had that one client, well, I'm a high performer. I got bored and I started looking around because I'm like, I need a challenge. This is not a challenge. And I can't just come in and put in 8 hours and be done with it. I want to know that what I'm doing actually makes a difference. And if I'm not getting that feedback, I'm not getting that challenge, I'm not and especially after we went through that huge change management project, I was now hooked. I love that kind of shit. I was like, yeah, I want to do more of this. And being able to see that it's not just like regular project management. So change management, if you guys don't know, it is managing the people side of change. Because if you cannot manage those emotions, you cannot get people and persuade and influence them and get them to actually buy into the new vision, guess what? You're not going to get the ROI that you were looking for. You are not going to be successful within the company or within the business. And sure, you can blame the other company. They're difficult. They're prima donnas. They're this, they're that. They're just unrealistic, all of those kind of things. But I don't know about you. All leadership material I've ever read or understand, and the elite performers, they all talk about extreme ownership. They all talk about taking accountability, and they don't blame that shit on anybody else. And I know it can be easy. We all fall into some of that point. And it's easy to kind of point the fingers. And sometimes, even with doing the inner work, you actually have to go through that phase. You can't actually skip it. You need to point the finger and go, that fucker screwed me up. And now I'm pissed and I'm hurt. But you don't stay in that emotion. But it is part of the process. So managing the emotions is actually going to get you to a better place. So a couple of things that ended up going wrong. One, they waited too long before they brought in a bunch of hired guns to fix things. And I see companies do this over and over and over and over again because, and this is just my opinion, but there's this tendency to not want to deal with the little problems, always waiting until it becomes a big fire. And I see this happening not only in business, but in personal relationships. How many times do you see um, people, you let things slide? Oh, I don't want to upset anybody. Oh, they're in a good mood. It's just not a big deal. Maybe I'll just wait. I'll talk about it tomorrow. I'll talk about it next week. I'll talk about it. You know what? It's Christmas. Let's just all get along and we're not going to address this. And then you wait and you wait and you wait and then you blow up because the emotions of letting it slide so many times becomes too overwhelming, and now you feel like you have to say it and you can't take it anymore, and the problem is you've waited too long, and now you're bringing the energy of the 20 times that you let it go and you're blasting it on the one situation, and everybody looks at you like you've overreacted. Why? Because you've overreacted. Because you took all those 20 times that you let it slide and that you were slowly but surely building up resentment to the point where now you feel justified at being able to address it. And most of the time, this happens because people don't want to be viewed as a whiner or a bitch or a problem or always being critical. And we're so conditioned in this way that what it does is it causes people not to want to speak up, not to address how they actually feel. When the thing is if you actually allow somebody space to talk about how they feel, and when it's a small thing, that's when you can actually shift it much easier rather than waiting until it's a friggin' mountain that you've got to move. But now you feel like you can be a hero because you put out a big fire rather than dealing with all the smoke that was coming up, right? Nobody wants to, you don't get any brownie points or kudos, and it never makes the news if you're always just putting out the smoking fires and you prevented things from happening. And typically, not always, but typically, that is something that women tend to do. They're very detailed oriented. They are very high alert, especially if they've been through trauma. They pick up the early warning signs and they put out all of these fires before they even start. What ends up happening when you have much more of a male dominated industry, which is transport and logistics, they don't want to deal with the little fires, the little potentials that could be problems, and they wait until it's an out of control 4 alarm fire, and then they bring in the hired guns. Had they actually taken the time to understand, it never would have gotten to that point. They wouldn't have had to dump a bunch of money in hiring a bunch of hired guns and managers, because it wasn't just the people at my level, it was a bunch of managers and the change management experts and all of these kind of things, because they failed to notice the early warning signs and then had to dump a bunch of money into it, only to not only get the results but end up losing the client anyway. And I see this happen in relationships too. People, they ignore the early warning signs. They let it go, they let it go. And this is on both men and women's side. Maybe the woman, they ignore little signs, or I'm not going to pay attention to it. They turn a blind eye to certain things. They don't want to be the one that looks like they're nagging, that they're critical, and, oh, I'm making too big of a deal out of it. I just need to manage my emotions. And what ends up happening is then he goes and cheats, and you're just like, well, fuck. Or on the other side, she is communicating. She is saying things that need to be fixed or changed. And maybe you're not taking it so serious. You don't see it as a big problem because it's not yet at 4 alarm fire status. So when it's not there, you don't see it as a valid problem that needs to be worked on. And because of this, when she finally gets fed up and just says, I'm done, you're surprised. You're caught off guard by it. And meanwhile, you thought things were getting better because she got quiet. And it wasn't the case. She just stopped fighting. She just stopped caring. And finally got to the point where it just didn't matter anymore. So this is where you can run into situations where if you're not careful and you don't actually know how to do that inner work, that emotional work, it's going to cause problems. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's it is challenging, but you can prevent a lot of fires by understanding this stuff, both in your personal life and your professional life. And just because it's business and you have more systems, more structures, more guidelines to help you stay on track, that doesn't guarantee success. And just getting results doesn't guarantee success. It doesn't mean that the partnership isn't going to fall apart. And so there, this brings me to another story that I want to share around, so how do you deal though, like, maybe somebody actually directly lies to you and you like, well, how am I supposed to deal with that when they friggin' lied to me? I thought I did all the right things. I had all the checks and balances in place. Well, you know, I can't be held responsible if they friggin' out and out lie. Here's the thing. And sometimes when you're going to a company, you may be taking on, you're inheriting other people's lies. So even if you are trustworthy and you do have high integrity, you could be inheriting other people's lies. And that can be a problem, right? But, and what often ends up happening is because people then feel betrayed, and I'm not saying this is necessarily wrong. Do what you feel you need to do for you. But what I'd like you to know is yes, you can just go, you know what? I'm cutting that person out of my life. Done. They're gone. They've proven that they're not trustworthy. This is not a good situation. They're done. And, or, or you can learn to be able to salvage relationships by understanding how to do the inner work, how to rebuild trust with situations. So the story that I wanted to share was there was a situation where I had come on the company. So, and this ties to the company. So, the company that I was at where we lost those two customers, and then because we had lost those two customers, I was bored. I actually started applying for a few different jobs. And I guess this other company that inherited one of those customers that we had lost, um, they had gone to a recruiting agency, and I had applied for the recruiting agency. And my resume landed on the new third party logistics manager's desk, and he's looking at it. And the thing is this customer explicitly said, I absolutely don't want anybody hired from this other company. They screwed us over. We don't want anybody that came from that company. They saw my resume and they went, she has a lot of really good skills here. We could probably use her. Can we bring her in? And they're like, well, who is it? And they're like, well, it's Tina Ballmer. And they're like, oh, yeah, you can bring her in. I was the only one that actually got a pass. Why? It had nothing to do with my skills. Although my skills were good, there were a lot of other people within the company that had good skills. But what was even better than my skills was my ability to actually build relationships with that customer, with everybody that I interacted with, no matter how shitty they actually treated me, because they were in a lot of friggin' pain. So they lashed out a lot, a lot. And I never ever took that personally. And now some people can say, oh, Tina, you were being a doormat, you're being a people pleaser. No, fuck that. I could see that they were actually in pain. And I took more principles above personalities. I didn't look at how they delivered the message, because, yes, if I only looked at that, they were being assholes. And they were being abusive sometimes, too, downright abusive. And so I didn't react to how they delivered the message. I only looked at Was what they were saying actually true? If it was, then how do we fix it? I didn't look at who was to blame. I didn't look to fight back. Well, yeah, but you dropped your orders in late, and that's why we didn't include them in the load plan. And that's why now you have to pay this extra fee for us to rush the orders. And it's like, no, I didn't do any of that. I looked, I analyzed the data, I brought back proof, I executed on what it is that they needed. So I fixed the immediate problem, what they needed, and then I went back and I figured out, how did this problem get started in the first place? Why did this even happen? So not only did I fix the immediate problem, I searched the root cause and implemented corrective action. And this came from the other company that I had worked at before that, because I was involved in implementing an ISO 9000 program. I think it was an ISO 9001. I think that's what it was. But we went through this whole process. Again, I'm very focused on being able to tell the truth. And we had to fill out these things called um, non-conformity reports. So before we were at that point, we really didn't have written processes and procedures. So I was part of the process of writing up SOPs, and then my little hall monitor side of me came out. And when people didn't conform to the process was to fill out a non-conformity report. I filled out probably the most nonconformity reports. So that didn't actually win me very many friends. So I hadn't quite fully developed emotionally there, but I was more focused on the actual solution. But because of going through that experience and being wired or conditioned basically to always look at finding ways to implement the solution. Now, I did improve by adding an additional layer of understanding how people react when you actually correct them. And to me, I didn't see it as an affront. To me, I see that as value. I'm like, no, please tell me honestly, openly, directly. Don't be mean about it. Don't be an asshole, but do present what it is that you feel that I can improve, because I am always eager to improve. And I worry about people who are not, right? So for me, this was a normal, natural way of being. And so I excel in those kind of environments. And but if you do not pay attention to the emotional component of this, and people feel like you've stepped on their toes, even if you haven't, even if you didn't intend that, I promise you, they will retaliate. They will lash out at you. They will be in pain. They will take that personally, and then they will attack you. And understanding this piece, understanding why people resist things, why people get stuck in fear, why they, and how to move them into a place of love. And for in the case of business, it's not like love, right? But imagine everybody operating at their job as if they actually loved what they were doing. Even if it's a 9 to 5, because I know the whole online thing, it's all rah entrepreneurship, but guess what? Companies still need employees, right? And it's not a bad thing to be an employee if that is what you want. You want the 9 to 5 because you have other things that are more important than the actual work that you do. And some people, they don't want to be in the 1%. Why? Because it's fucking hard to get to the 1%. It is really hard. It requires you to change, like on a cellular level, like tear yourself down, liquefy yourself from a caterpillar, and then transform into that butterfly. And that's a painful process. Not everybody's cut out for that. Those of us that are know that we are, and we're willing to pay that price, even though it hurts. But being able to help people through these processes and help them transition and help companies help people that don't have that mindset, that don't have that emotional understanding. It can be extremely frustrating when you're a high performer and you don't understand that other people don't actually operate that way. And it is maddening. Like, it's probably a good thing most of us don't have that force choke capability because a lot of us would end up using it. I know there's been many times before I had emotional maturity and understanding of these things, and understanding that other people just don't learn this way, and it's okay, and learning how to navigate and communicate with people in a way that they actually understand so that they are productive, that they are happy, and happier people are more productive when they feel like they're successful, that they are doing a good job, and you know how to communicate and build that within them. Guess what? They want to do an even better job. People, especially if they're not in the 97%, they don't like that kind of pain. They like that pleasure. They like being rewarded and acknowledged and those kind of things. And that is a foreign concept to people in the 1%. It is very difficult for them to understand that. They don't get it. They're like, what the fuck do you like? I have to coddle you. I have to like take care of all this emotional stuff. Get your shit together, right? That's how they want to respond, but they know they get in trouble for that. Now, understanding how to manage this stuff is key. It is so important because your employees are not going to be the top 1%. And yes, you can develop them to move up to that level, and you can get A players or B players, C players, but you know what? I always plan, and my training is focused as if I had a D player, that they're like one step away from failure. They're like, you know, they're the challenge of the challenge. Those are the ones that I get to train. They are they they are like trying to train Helen Keller, and that's not a bad thing because Helen Keller became a very important person because somebody believed in her enough that somebody believed that she was able to actually be a productive member of society. And that's why we know who Helen Keller was, because she had challenges and obstacles, and somebody looked at those challenges and obstacles and said, we can figure out a solution. And when you have somebody like that that comes into your organization, that helps you on a personal level, if you're a business owner, to be able to manage the emotion, bridge the gap between you and how you think, and help your team think that same way, and help your customers or your vendors think the same way and get on the same page, because we are now dealing with the emotions versus the system. Systems are easy. Emotions are the 80%. If you don't deal with those, even if you get the systems right, even if you get the results, you could still potentially lose the clients. Okay? Because people don't remember what it is you did, how great you were, how amazing you were. You got the award, you got the trophy, you got all the things. They remember one thing. They remember how you made them feel. And this can happen in such little ways. And you don't know that this can cause you a problem down the line. So, say a customer comes into your environment, they actually purchase. They're excited, they loved what you had to present. They're dealing with maybe your salespeople. Your salespeople do something that kind of gives them the ick. Now, even though this customer is still hanging around, this customer has some trust issues. They're not certain. They're skeptical. Does this company actually operate the way that they advertised? Does this company actually do the things that they say that they're doing, or was that all a dog and pony show to get you in the door? And now that you're the customer, the only time you're going to be nice to them is when you're going to try and upsell them. Mm-mm-mm. That can cause you a lot of problems down the line that you didn't even know were happening. And these customers, they fall off, they ask for refunds, they don't get the results, not because they didn't believe in you. In the beginning, they did, but now somebody did something. And then they watch you reward that salesperson with a trophy. And they kind of go, hmm. They remember how you made them feel, and that'll cost you. And you won't even know it's costing you until it becomes a four-alarm fire. And now you're wondering what's going on. And you can crack the whip harder, you can do all the things, and you can implement more systems, you can enforce the SOPs, you can do continuous improvement, but you are still leaving a shit ton of money on the table. And you are losing out on being able to actually change people's lives because of how some people within your company interact. And this stuff happens in all kinds of companies. It happened in companies. I was on a 2-year project where we had to negotiate. Um, it was a huge change. It was a mergers and acquisitions between two major companies. We had to negotiate. I was part of the freight team and negotiating contracts. And these should have been simple. We should have been able technically to get this done within a year. It ended up taking 2 years. Now, the majority of the contracts got signed in the first year. The ones that were challenging were all not because it wasn't laid out properly, that we weren't able to provide the proof, but no, because they had been hurt, they had been treated badly within the company, not to do anything with me, not their experience with me, not how I interacted with them, but because how somebody else within the company, maybe that person isn't even with the company anymore, but how they got treated, they remember how they felt, they have no trust, they are skeptical about everything, they are making you jump through hoops, they're being deliberately obstinate, even though you have all the proof, all the information, all the stuff, and like you're losing your mind. You're like, what the fuck? I don't know. Like, what do you want from me, right? You're kind of like, you're that frustrated. You're like, okay, man, you're not even talking sense here. This isn't logical. I can promise you, if it is not logical, it is an emotional issue, and you need to be able to understand how to address those emotions so that you can close the deal. You can close the negotiation. You can win that person back over and repair that relationship that somebody else within your company fucked up and damaged because they didn't have the emotional intelligence, or they were being pushed by a certain directive that only focused on their KPIs. When you only focus on your KPIs and you don't focus on building the relationships, it is going to cost you without you even actually knowing how much it costs you, until those deals fall apart, until those relationships fall apart, until you've done all of these things, you've put in all of this work, all of this time, all of this money, all of this effort, only for shit to fall apart. All because you didn't want to deal with the early warning signs. You didn't want to deal with the emotions. You thought people were being whiners, that they were just snowflakes. All people have feelings, even the ones that pretend that they don't. Even the so-called narcissists, they all have feelings. And understanding how to navigate those feelings, understanding how to master those emotions, right? Yeah. That can be really challenging. That is an excellent, excellent question, Mark. How do you get a company to focus on long term stability versus short term gain? If somebody is focusing on short term gain, I can promise you they're in a state of fear. They are operating from a place of panic. They have no trust, no faith in their ability to actually repeat the process because they don't know how to build relationships, and they only know that their customers are going to get lost at some point. So they only focus on the numbers, the short term, make the win, close the deal at whatever cost, do whatever you have to take, because they don't believe and they have no trust in their ability to actually form a meaningful relationship that's going to last. And until you can actually start quantifying that and calculating some numbers, they're going to be resistant to looking at that long term stability unless they have a higher vision, unless it now becomes important to them because at some point they maybe have to switch gears, or in order to get to that next level or to get to those higher caliber clients, those higher caliber clients, I can promise you they're skeptical as fuck. Why? They didn't get to that place without being burnt along the way many, many times. So now they have all kinds of trust issues that you need to prove that you can actually build a relationship. And if they see any little warning flag, any little sign, they're going to hold back. They're going to make you work for it, and they're going to resist rather than you actually building a genuine connection. And when you can actually do that, you have to see if you can quantify what it's actually costing you. Unfortunately, most of the time, they don't do that. They don't focus on that until they've lost a big client. And they can either fire a bunch of people on the team, get rid of them, or like I've seen this happen so many times too because I've been part of system implementations. Oh, if you get this new system, you're going to save so much money and it's going to be so amazing. And they focus on just implementing the system, all the tactical, you know, practical side of things. They don't focus on getting everybody's buy-in and understanding. They just ram it through, right? Get it done, implement it, and we can get rid of all these people because now we have this wonderful system and we're getting rid of all of the fat, right? We're cutting the fat, and we're going to save this amount of money, and this is the ROI that you're going to have on the system because now you're not going to need all of these people to do these manual processes that you're doing. The system will save you, right? No. The system gets implemented. You don't want to pay for all of the modules that you're going to need or all the licenses that you're going to need, and because you're looking at cost, right? Because you're in this fear state, because you're not in that growth state, you're in the fear state, and you're contracted, and you're just like, just get it done. And all of that stuff does is it leaves you contracted. You're not open. You're not open to new ways of doing things because you're in such a fear state. Now, that being said, you have to give them some sort of stability. And what change management does when you bring somebody in to work with your team, we're going to take that pressure off of you as the CEO, the owner, the leadership. All you have to do is sit back and you have to rubber stamp things or say, no, absolutely, we can't do that. That's out of the scope of the project, right? Maybe there's a certain area of the business you don't want to touch because you know that there's some other things coming down the pipe that it could cause a problem, right? So you can have it so that you sit back, your change management person like myself would come in, I work with your team, I deal with the emotions, I get them, I pull the genius out of your team to be able to implement the solutions, solve the problems, and we work on the emotional side of things. We work on not just fixing what the challenges are. We build your team up. We get people in the right roles. We understand what needs to move around by creating a safe environment that you don't have fucking time to deal with. You don't have time to deal with that because your emotions. But now imagine that bandwidth taken off of your plate. You have somebody come in, work with your team, execute on that, and implement these things. And you didn't have to deal with it. You now see the benefit of taking that step back. And now you can focus your energy, your attention on things that will bring the business forward even more, that will free up your time, your creativity, your energy. Think of how much energy you're burning. Do you know how much energy it takes when all you want to do is rip people's heads off and you have to play nice? That's fucking exhausting, right? It is brutally exhausting when you are in that state that you're having to suppress those emotions. That takes a ton of energy. Imagine that being freed up, right? And when you can do that, your team now feels better. Your team feels more empowered. They want to continue that. They want to contribute their ideas. And instead of you like having to stand there and crack the whip, you're like, holy shit, they're solving problems on their own and I'm not having to deal with this. And you might feel some anxiety because now what do? You've been operating this way for so long, and now you don't know what to do. You need some help with your emotional management of, well, what's the value of me if the only thing I've ever known and the only way I've been able to produce results is just stand there and crack the whip and make everybody so afraid that they jump and do the things that I need them to do. Now what do I do? Now how do I operate? How do I shift to being this new person? How do I deal with peace? It's like a war veteran that all they've ever known is war and battle. And then you have to bring them back to civilian life. And you're like, well, no, the shit that you did to survive in battle, it's not cool to do that here. You're not allowed to do that here. And you may go through a depression. You may go through feelings of anxiety of what's my purpose? What do I do now? And dealing with those emotions and helping you transition to those things. I can work one-on-one with a business owner as well to help you identify those things and be able to help you work through those at a faster rate so that you can adjust to the new way of being, because it's not just your team that needs to adjust. You need to adjust, because when you adjust, you change, you set the pace, you set the tone. They see that you transition, and I saw this in one of the companies. So one of the companies that I work with, they went through different transitions, and one of the president of the company, he inherited the company from his father. That's a challenge. And when he came in, he had big shoes to fill, big shoes. And so there was a lot of things that, people aren't respecting him as much. Like, they're giving him respect because he's like, the president. But, there's an energy there. It's like, yeah, you only have this job because your dad owned the company and you inherited it, and now we have to listen to you. We don't want to. Not that they're saying that. They go from a wanting energy to, oh, I have to. And that's never a good energy to have in any business. If your people feel like they have to follow you, then it is incumbent on you to be able to make the necessary changes within yourself that you become somebody they want to follow. Because I can promise you, a leader that people actually want to follow, that they have trust, that they have connection, that they have emotional attachment to, they will follow that leader to their death, right? They will go above and beyond to do whatever for that leader because they want to, because they feel a connection with that leader. But if they are dealing with somebody that they feel like they have to, and somebody who rules out of fear and intimidation and um, that kind of method, it ends up um, being an exhausting process for both people. Yes, you can still get results from that method. They're short term. You will have a high turnover. You're going to have high turnover of employees, high turnover of customers, high turnover of vendors and suppliers, that there's always changing. But you feel good because you think, oh, we're always changing, we're always growing. No, if you keep having shit happening over and over and over in your company and you're not actually able to solve it at the root cause so that you're not having to touch it all the time, then you have a wound that hasn't been cleaned out properly. And your business is hurting and it's going to get infected again. And then you're going to have to deal with it again. And some people will be like, no, Tina, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, sure. You're probably right. You're probably right. I've just seen this stuff enough times. I've come in enough times that when I come in, I'm able to win people over because I actually care about them. I care about the company. I care about the vendors. I care about every person that I interact with because I want to understand. I want to come to a win-win solution, and I want to be able to help, even if somebody is being a complete ass, even if they're being a complete ass. And I'm capable of being a complete ass. That's why I can have compassion because I've done my inner work. I know what makes me be an asshole. So I understand when somebody else is operating in asshole energy, and I don't take it personally. And I look for ways that we can find common ground, we can find solution. I focus on keeping my cool and keeping my energy in check so that we can work together. Um, and if they choose not to, then that's up to them. That's okay. That's not something I can control. If they need to go through some more pain before they get it, I accept that that's their process. Because I know there's been times I've needed to go through more pain before I get it. So it's there's I have no room for hate in my heart, none at all. And this is why I'm able to be happy, right? Because I use these tools on a daily basis. I use this process in my daily life all the time. And when stuff gets hard, I really use these tools a lot. And helping other people through these challenges um, is something that is really near and dear to me because when I see somebody go from being in a place of pain, whatever reason is for that pain, and I've been in business situations where I've had VPs and senior managers open up to me, and I'm like a supervisor or a junior manager or something like that, and they just feel like that they can open up. I have this safe energy that people will actually tell me the truth, and it's because if we can't deal with the truth, we can't create that safe environment where people can actually talk freely and open up freely. And you are able to help them if they've been in environments where they weren't able to talk freely, because it's not just the stuff that goes on in your company. You're inheriting everybody else's trauma from whatever companies or childhoods that they grew up in. And nobody comes with warning labels. Nobody comes with warning labels. We all have stuff that we have to deal with. And it's just mind-boggling to me that people don't feel that this is important and that they think that business is just business. It's not personal and it's okay that if it's cutthroat. No, it's not okay. And it will friggin' cost you. It cost that company that I first talked about at the beginning. It cost that company 3 Fortune 500 companies that they that doesn't that's just losing the yearly contracts that there were probably at least 30 million in freight. So probably, it's just a lot of money. And those could have been long-term successful partnerships. Because the thing is when I went to that other company that didn't want to hire anybody from that first company, and I came on there, they got sold a bill of goods. They got lied to because they were hurt. That customer was hurt, and they didn't want to have to deal with any other third-party logistics provider. But they also didn't want to deal with it themselves. So they made a warehousing company take on this additional component, and that was part of the deal, the negotiation. And this company had no intention of taking on freight. So whenever we brought in freight people, one of the things that the original hiring manager, maybe this is what he got told, um, the original hiring manager, oh yeah, we're going to build the freight team, it's going to grow, and we're going to do all these amazing things. And 5 years in, this guy that left a job that was actually higher paying to come to this lower paying job for potential, and he was really good at what he did. And I had to give him a review, but I couldn't give him anywhere. Like, there was nowhere to promote him. There was absolutely nowhere to promote him. And we eventually ended up losing him because the company wasn't willing to grow in that perspective. And because of that, we lost really good employees. And then I had to hire people, and then I was told to go for the A players, go for the A players. And I'm like, fuck, you don't have an A player opportunity here. So I said, fuck it. And I hired some C players because at least I know that they would show up. They'd be miserable and they'd have attitude problems, but at least they'd be bodies in the seats. And this wasn't rocket science that I was training them for. And guess what? Those people stayed. They stayed like 8 years after I left, and I was with that company for 5 years. So it's like, and they used the SOPs I created even after I left the company. So when I go in, I fix things. I work to fix things at root cause, and making sure that when we implement it, you're not having to go back and retouch it year after year after year. It's worth doing that deep dive. Think how much money, and that could be one way that you can quantify and get a company to take a look at the benefit of why they would want to look at that long-term solution rather than those quick fix band-aid solutions, and what it's actually costing them. How many times are they having to revamp a system, a process? Um, are they having to update their materials? They're having to change a bunch of things because it wasn't done in a proper way. It wasn't done with an emotional component in the mix, and it was just done purely systematic. That can end up costing people. That new systems have to be implemented when they find out that it wasn't really the system that was the problem in the first place. It was the emotions. And oftentimes that's people's inability to own up to the lies. So they learn to lie and cover up because they're in a fear-based environment. So they learn things like deflecting blame, pointing the fingers. There's all this internal fighting that's going on. People aren't working together. You might hear expressions like, oh, you guys all work in silos and you can't get along, and all of these different kind of things. Those things are your early warning. Those are your early red flags that something needs to be addressed. Hey, Saeed, good to see you. I'm doing well. How are you? Um, so being able to understand these things is really vital to your business, and being able to put these things in place and creating an environment that is focused on solutions, focused on an open, honest communication. And you can't just show up and go, everybody just start, be honest, just open up, talk to me. It doesn't work like that. That's just going to get them to shut down even more. It does take time. I'm not going to lie. It does take a bit of time on the front end of being able to make these changes and to do this stuff. But it is worth it in the long run. It is definitely worth it in the long run, that your people are much happier. You don't have a higher turnover. And the fact that people consider it normal that their staff, their people don't want to stay within their company, here's what I would suggest to you. You're not giving them enough of a growth plan. They don't see opportunity to grow within the company because it's always harder to start over in a new company. And I know in this day and age, it's like, oh, well, I'll just go to another company or I'll start my own company or go do this kind of stuff. You must look at the emotional component of your people, of your vendors, of your suppliers, of all of this kind of stuff, because any company that you're working with, there is a cost to have to change it. There's time that you lose. And then you can quantify it by looking at how much time are you actually spending on how many people do you have dedicated to these things that are changes that are you're implementing all the time and you're doing all these different things. Maybe the ROI is enough. Maybe it is. And there's been plenty of times I've been in businesses and I've had to do cost benefit analysis. I've had employees come up to me and say, hey, we need to do this kind of thing or we need this system change. And it's like, well, this systems change is going to cost us this, but for you to do this manually, it doesn't cost as much. So we're just going to keep doing it manually right now, right? Because there's only so much that you have in the budget. Now, there's ways that you also address that because if you just go, well, no, we're not doing that, and you don't explain why, you don't help them understand the benefits of the other projects that you have on the go, then people will get their nose out of joint. They'll think that you don't actually care. They will still start operating like you don't care, and none of this will get communicated. None of it. And they will not perform as well. And some may actually actively sabotage. And but I think the majority of the people, they maybe just hold back. They get their nose out of joint for a day or two, and maybe they go back. Most of your high performers. Thanks, Mark. I'm glad you found it valuable. I will be uploading the recording on my YouTube channel, Coach Tina B 125, if there's anything that you want to miss. But I have been on here for an hour and 6 minutes, so I should probably wrap it up and head to bed myself. So, guys, I hope this is helpful. This is kind of stuff that I love talking about. I love being able to show people how the emotional stuff, doing the inner work, and dealing with traumas, because I can promise you there's people within your organization that have undealt with traumas that's costing your business. Even if you haven't dealt with it, even if you're like, I don't need to deal with that. You just need to focus on results and just get shit done. It's like, yeah, but I can promise you your people aren't operating at that level. Oh, yeah, they are, Tina. Maybe some of them are. Maybe the majority of them are. And good for you if that's the case. All the power to you. But I can promise you that there's probably still room for improvement because the worst fault of all is to be aware of none. So, guys, anyway, I hope that helps give you some food for thought. For those of you that are watching and still here, I will be launching a new coaching program, an 8-week coaching program. And I'm going to launch that on April 17th, which is my birthday. So I'm excited about that. I got a lot of work to do to get this done, to pull this off. It's not going to be like perfect, but it will be, you will have some beta pricing available as I grow this. So because I'm still distilling all of the experience and knowledge and stuff that I have, and I'm trying to put it in a way that makes sense, but is broad enough to appeal to many different people. But the real value will be me working one-on-one with you to either help you personally as a business owner or to be able to help come in and deal with working with your team so that you can get some peace of mind. So those will be like the two structures. I'm not sure if I'm going to roll the second half out. It depends on the demand just yet. So probably better to work with the business owner one-on-one because you as the leader of the organization. I need to know that you and I are on the same page, that we're in alignment with this, so that then I can help you roll this out to your team if that's so where you want to move towards. So I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to it, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to help your business grow. It's going to help the people on your team grow. It's going to help you be able to have a bigger legacy, bigger impact on the things that you do, and you'll do it in a way that you're not so stressed, that you won't be wishing that you had force choke powers. So, guys, with that, we're going to wrap this up, and we will see you again tomorrow night. Have a great night, and we will talk to you again soon.